Another LCS playoff week in the books, and we had a banger week. We had four series. We will, of course, get to all of them. We are recording immediately after NRG and GGS, or I guess GG, Golden Guardians and NRG. Crazy series. We'll get into it, of course. Doublelift, talking about next year already. We got a good hint as to his future plans. We're, of course, going to start with that. Tons of stuff to get to in this episode. Episode 136 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT250. Jinter, we have to start with the Doublelift stuff. They get eliminated yesterday or 2 days ago, whatever it is now. And immediately everyone starts wondering, what is Doublelift going to do? Because I don't know about you, but for me, I was worried like, oh, maybe he only came back to play with Bjergsen. And then once Bjergsen retired, maybe he doesn't really want to play that bad anymore. What were you thinking?
Well, I think definitely the early impression as to why Doublelift came back in the first place seemed to be from everybody on the outside looking in was that he got to play with Bjergsen and he got to play on a team that he wanted to play with. So I think when they got eliminated, everybody was wondering the question of is Doublelift going to continue playing? And I think people were probably watching that interview with a bit of bated breath, worried that he might say, "Oh yeah, I'm done, back to being a streamer." But Doublelift obviously was I wouldn't say he was emotional or anything, but he was definitely sort of going through that process in his own head right there during the interview. But it was pretty clear from the responses to his questions that he wants to play. He's still motivated to play, and he said he wants to play next year. So thank God we don't lose him again.
Yeah, we don't lose. What would you say he's the main character of the LCS? He is, right?
Yeah.
There's no debate in that.
I mean, especially since Bjergsen is retired and likely no longer coming back,
I
considering.
would I would still argue that he was even when Bjergsen was in the league. Like, don't get me wrong. You and I have said we think Bjergsen is the goat.
Well, I
However,
think
and a lot of people disagree with us on that. However, but like as far as personality goes and skill, like Doublelift is going to give interesting things off the Rift, whereas Bjergsen was a god on the Rift. So to me, main character is Doublelift, no doubt.
I think it probably started out as Bjergsen, then sort of became Doublelift when he went early TSM and early Team Liquid days. Doublelift kind of took that mantle, so he probably still has it. Yeah, he's definitely the main character of the LCS.
Yeah, he
I'd
took
say.
main character when he went to TL and went on the 4P, right? And then
Yeah.
TSM couldn't win again because Doublelift. Yeah, that was when he became main character for sure. But yeah, so we're getting him for 2024. This is definitely good news. The LCS, God knows they need a damn main character. It looks like we're gonna have it now. There's no for sure thing saying that he does play though. He wants to play, and it reiterated in an interview with Degon like if it's up to him, he's going to play. But as we've seen in seasons past, it's not always up to him, right? There was the TSM drama where like he thought he was going to play for TSM and they went a different. I don't remember the whole. It was. It's been a while, but the point is he didn't get to play that split, whereas he was intending on playing. So it's possible that there's still teams that like either they already have an 80 carry that they're happy with, or they can't afford Doublelift even if he does take a pay cut or whatever. So like not anything is for sure yet. It's just incredibly likely that he's going to play.
Well, it's very good that Doublelift has already publicly said that he does want to play next year. You still have to take into consideration that he's in the tier of players, like your tier one, tier two players per region, where they are going to hold out or not necessarily play unless they're going to be on a good team or a good squad. So when I do hear that Doublelift would love to play again next year, that is great. But I'm not taking that as a blanket statement where no matter what happens in the offseason, Doublelift is going to be on an LCS team because I don't think it's very likely for him to join a Dignitas, join a FlyQuest if they're
Immortals.
not going to be putting out the same type of roster as they did this past year. He's definitely, well, I mean, Immortals isn't going to be here probably, so, but I don't think it's unlikely for him to join one of these replacement teams unless they're a big name or like a Sentinels or something. So while it's good to hear that he's going to be playing and he's looking to play, I wouldn't say that just creates the 100% certainty that he's going to be in a roster because I expect him to be in sort of like a Jensen upset type situation where if it's the case where there's just not a spot available for spring split and you might have to play the waiting game a little bit for a spot to open and maybe a team is underperforming or a player is underperforming and he can then slot in and join a better team. I think that can be the case, but I still think all of the top tier teams will probably look to try to acquire Doublelift or build some sort of team or foundation or idea around Doublelift being on their team. Because when Doublelift is a free agent, actually, is he a free agent? When is his contract up? I feel like that's another.
That is a good question. I could pull that up right now. One thing I wanted to ask you is that like, or point out at least, is like not every team, not every top team needs an 80 carry. Like Cloud Nine's not losing Berserker for Doublelift. You know what I mean? So like
It
that's something to
depends.
consider as well. You think they would?
Depends how hardcore Berserker Smurfs and end of regular season plus Worlds. Maybe he gets offers from top LCK LPL teams. You know what I mean? Like,
I would be very surprised. But anyways, at Doublelift, I'm looking on the contract thing. His contract expires this year,
okay,
November
well,
21st, 2023.
then he will be a free agent. So, in terms of talking about team possibilities, as you've kind of mentioned it, the way it stands, if we want to group these sort of top tier teams in the LCS, I would argue those are your Cloud9, your Golden Guardians, your Team Liquid, your 100 Thieves, and maybe now your NRG. Maybe throw them. And I'm not putting FlyQuest in there. The only reason I'm not doing that is because we're still not sure if FlyQuest is going to roll out the same type of roster as they did in both spring and summer split, with a clear increase in investment when it comes to players and whatnot. So while I think if FlyQuest wants to put out a competitive roster, that could be an option for Doublelift, but I'm not including them right now because we don't know if they're even an option.
That's really surprising to me that you wouldn't put FlyQuest in there. I think you're right, by the way, in saying like we don't know if they're going to look to spend again because they spent this year, things didn't go well. Maybe they're a little bit shy, but like I don't know, as a team that just spent, maybe they are still looking to win again. They still have a new owner, right? They might look to make a splash
Uh,
still.
it just all depends on that. I think in the likelihood that FlyQuest does spend, they're definitely going to be in that conversation.
And they do have FlyQuest does still have a player signed that I know. Well, a couple players still signed that I know Doublelift wouldn't mind playing with. Impact, Spica, Vulcan expires. But Vikla and Prince, I don't think they're coming back. Their contracts are through to 2024, but I still don't think they're coming back anyways.
Well, I
But
think Vikla, no matter what, definitely won't
yeah.
be here.
Uh, Anyways, lots of possibilities, and I wouldn't be surprised if he just stayed on 100 Thieves, but just they build a completely new team around him. Is there anything on 100 Thieves that they're like, yeah, we absolutely need to keep? Not really. Like I could see them keeping Someday, for example. Do they absolutely need to? Not really. They were clearly willing to let Someday go this year, right?
I mean,
So,
the thing that I think will be the most important is probably going to be the support player for whichever
mhm.
team he joins. I think both Doublelift and Aframu have sort of talked about this, pretty recently in terms of the dynamic of playing with Doublelift and how he likes to have good synergy with his lane partners, and that's something really important to him. And Aframu kind of said that's what made them so good back in the rush hour days, was because they had that built up synergy for so long. So when it comes to Doublelift joining potentially a new team or even staying on 100 Thieves, I definitely expect the support to be the most, sort of the determining factor in whatever team he may join. So, and considering what we know about Doublelift, it would not surprise me at all to see him have a short list of players that he wants to play with, ones whom he knows are very good players and are veterans of the league, whom you don't have to probably spend or put a lot of effort into building, synergy and with, just because it might naturally be there. There's hopefully going to be more of a natural connection when you're playing with like a good veteran than a young player. So if I had to guess, I put Busio on there, so that might be staying with 100 Thieves. Could be with Busio on a different team, obviously pairing with Core JJ, something to the likes of that, and then sort of the other players that you've mentioned, whom Doublelift has publicly given praise to, which is the likes of Vulcan and Huhi.
Yeah. I
Those, if I had to name four supports, it'd probably be those ones who I'd expect Doublelift to pair up with next season, regardless of what team they're on. But in the case of Busio, probably 100 Thieves. In the case of Core JJ, probably Team Liquid. But put him with a Huhi or a Vulcan or something, and who knows? That could be a premium bot lane duo on a new team.
Yeah, and for the record, we recognize that it's super early to have these conversations, but it's still interesting nonetheless. Like it's fun to speculate about Doublelift, mostly because we mentioned how he's the main character and et cetera, et cetera. He's kind of the only guy that we would speculate this stuff with this early. Like it's not even the summer isn't even over yet.
Well, I mean, the other thing you
Um,
got to consider is when a player of his caliber and history becomes available, especially all the other teams in the LCS that are either already in the offseason or new prospective orgs that could be coming in, when they're trying to think of their philosophy or their, a player that they might want to build around, if that's the process that you got to start much earlier on than when Worlds is going on and all these other teams are playing. Like all these teams that are getting knocked out of all their various regional leagues, they are 1, 2, 3 steps ahead in the offseason. So It wouldn't
Yeah,
surprise
and
me at
there
all to see different orgs or teams already sort of internally compiling a bit of a list of who they might want to acquire or build around.
And one of the reasons why I actually don't think it's too early to talk about this is because Doublelift is one of those dominoes pieces, whereas like he's the first domino to fall, and then the rest of free agency kind of follows, right? Like because you mentioned there could be so many teams that are after this guy, there's usually a handful of guys that are those dominoes pieces. Doublelift is always going to be one of them. So that's why it's always relevant no matter what time of the year it is. If there's any chance that Doublelift could be on a new team or forming a new roster or whatever, it's going to be relevant no matter what. One thing that you kind of touched on was the Busio thing. I'm curious to know what his thoughts are. I don't think he would ever like, let's say he didn't enjoy playing with a rookie, he would never go out there and just be like, yeah, Busio was kind of bad, so I don't want to play with a rookie again or something like that. Like he would never throw a teammate, especially a brand new rookie like that, under the bus.
Unless
But
you're
I
Ole.
do wonder, I do wonder what he's thinking as far as like, do I want to go through another season of like teaching a really young support, or like if the opportunity comes where I could play with Vulcan? Yeah, Vulcan didn't have a great split because FlyQuest was they kaboomed, but like maybe I want to play with Vulcan, who's been the best support in the league for the last like 2 years or whatever it is, 2 3 years, depending on how far back you want to go when Core JJ was an absolute monster, right? So there's things like that where I don't expect Doublelift to talk about this right now. Maybe he will in the future, but right now he's not going to mention things like that. So I'm curious if like he's like, you know what, I can do one rookie, I can play with Busio again. I don't want to do it again where I have Tenacity and Busio, for example, where there's too many rookies and like he's trying to get his own footing again because he hadn't played in the league for 2 years. Like maybe that's just too much for him to handle, and it makes me wonder if that's what's going through his head or not.
Yeah, and I think that's not necessarily just limited to his support, partner. I think that will be something that's taken into consideration with regards to the whole team, whatever team he seems to join. I think it's unlikely that we see him on a similar built team to what we saw with 100 Thieves, where in the spring split they had two fresh rookies who had never played, a game in LCS, or I guess they played a game but never played more than 2 or 3 games in the LCS. So I think it's unlikely we see a bit of a situation like that, but you know, still could be, younger players, just not necessarily rookies per se.
I want to close out this conversation with two quick questions for you. If there's one player that you think he wants to play with, who do you think it is?
Or
And
JJ.
two, what team do you think he goes to? Which might be the same answer for the.
I think in a sense where, yeah, I think if it is Core J, it'd probably be Team Liquid. But like I said, I would not be underestimating the prospective new teams that could be coming in. Because
Mm,
similar to 100 Thieves, when they first came around, their first big acquisition they made was Aframu and Someday. Aframu, who was at the time one of the most popular players in the LCS, one of the best players in the LCS still at that time, because that was unfortunately his time on 100 Thieves, where he took up a bit of a decline. Where people, what was the meme? It was like spam this fire to make Aframu retire. That was
oh,
like the
don't
Twitch
even
spam.
remind me. That was so cringe.
Yeah. But luckily he came back on his Dig FlyQuest era. But
Yeah.
if a big org wants to come in, I would not be surprised at all to see them go for their big fish as Doublelift. That just, if you got Doublelift as a new team coming into the league, that instantly makes you probably at least top 4 popular teams in the league.
Yeah. That is interesting. So I agree with you with the Core JJ thing. I think that is definitely one
Because
of the
if you
players
had
that
to
would
pick
have to be on
one
his list.
player, it's got to be Core. Like,
Can I give an honorable mention though?
sure.
Impact. Have you ever heard of a player that played with Impact that didn't say they loved playing with Impact?
I can't
Like
think of one.
anybody that's a teammate of Impact always says like how valuable he is and how like he does a bunch of stuff that you don't see as well. Like yeah, we don't see it as the viewers, but the teammates definitely recognize that stuff. So I think Impact would be another one where Doublelift would maybe really want to play with him. But I do think the most likely team would be Team Liquid. Interesting though. Really interesting because I don't feel like super confident in anything. And I know free agency is months away, but it's going to be a good one as per usual. It almost always is, but it'll be a good one.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this stuff or
Um, I don't know. Lena also works at Sentinels now, and so if Sentinels is coming in, that's some bring
do
back
you have
bring back
some
the conflict of
inside
interest. Yeah,
do
I
you have
have
some
inside
inside
info.
news?
Yeah, I got that. I heard their that phone call on stream that happened again like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. Okay, we got a bunch of series to talk about. Before we get to them, just want to remind you guys to subscribe, hit the like button. You guys have been doing a great job of that. It's the easiest way to support us, guys. Just hit the like button, leave a comment. That stuff helps us out tremendously. And make sure you are subscribed. God, does it go a long way. And if you're new to the podcast, we do this every week, guys. So one of the good things about our podcast is we work our asses off to make sure that we get you guys the Monday content. There's no LCS podcast, to our knowledge, that comes out on Mondays, and that's why we work all weekend to get you guys this stuff ASAP. Even this episode might be a little scuffed because we're going live immediately after Golden Guardians Energy. We hope that you guys appreciate that and continue to support us, and well, hope you guys enjoy the podcast. Let's. Where are we starting here, Jinter? What team? What series are we starting with?
I mean, Golden Guardians versus NRG, it just happened, and I'm still trying to compute it in my brain
Process. Yeah.
because I feel like not to jump ahead here to the series to the Cloud9 EG series, but it felt like a lot of people were of the opinion that EG was playing better than Cloud9 in that series. And honestly, I felt like that sentiment applied more to this series in the Golden Guardians versus NRG series because I was seriously like I was going to be dumbfounded if the series ended in a 3-0 sweep because I thought it was clear as day that Golden Guardians was the better team, but they were just making some really I don't even know what to call them, just miscalculations of the game state or just going for unnecessary plays on repeat.
So, for disclosure, I am a Golden Guardians fan. This split, they have been my team. Genter knows I do love NRG as well, but they're my ex because of how inconsistent they are. I don't care, Genter. I am so fucking happy for NRG. I've never been happy to see the team that I want to win lose. I've never like just seeing. Did you watch any like the post game interviews or the player
Yeah,
cams or
yeah.
anything like that? Like Dokla, Palafox, like dude, it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. I maybe the reason why I'm not so sad is because I just think Golden Guardians is going to run the lower bracket. I don't know, but like, what a damn series! I so you're right. Golden Guardians. I mean, they were out, especially in game one. They were hard out playing NRG, and then they just kept inting hard over and over again. So I don't even know how to say like. I don't even think I can agree with they were out playing NRG with how bad they were throwing that game. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean,
Like
I guess
they
they
got
weren't
the huge
I
lead.
don't know if they were outplaying them per se, but I still thought that they were playing better than NRG for the most part.
Yeah, they were hard. Okay, I mean, Licorice had a great series. He was hard winning the top lane. Mind you, I still don't know how Rumble's getting through. I think Rumble is so freaking OP. Yeah, I don't know how people aren't banning it as much. Now, NRG did ban it a couple times this series, but the fact that Golden Guardians got it twice is pretty crazy. When it comes to throwing, there's a few guys you could point to. I didn't think who he had a great series. I thought a lot of who he I thought a lot of who he's engages were just like fights they do not need to take. And it's hard to know without the comms who's making the call to we need to fight here. But it's just easier to look at who he because he's usually the engaged guy, right? So that's why
Yeah,
it's like it's hard to read who's making these mistakes or who's making these calls.
yeah, I think it's pretty difficult to put the blame on any individuals in this series from the Golden Guardian sides, mainly because there was no instance pretty much in the entire series from the Golden Guardians perspective where any player was just getting shit on or any player was just getting gapped in lane. In fact, it was Golden Guardians who was actually accruing the majority of the lane advantages throughout the entire series. It just really felt like a big breakdown in the team fighting and team play aspect for Golden Guardians, where it was what in both game one and game four, or was it game three? Game one and game four, Golden Guardians decides to go for, a 5v5 Baron attempt when they're up 3, 4, 5,000 gold in both game states. And in the first case, in game one, they got the Baron, but got wiped in the team fight. And in the second case, the enemy team stole the Baron, and then they also got wiped. So
I
it,
don't. Again, it might be it might be somebody else. Whoever's calling these barons is hard trolling. I
uh,
don't know what's going on
yeah,
there.
we don't know who to blame. So I guess my point was you can't really blame an individual because you don't know who's making the calls. But presumably, whoever is making those calls is the one making those mistakes. And maybe it's a team thing. Maybe they just think
Yeah,
that they are stronger and they have fast Baron damage. I mean, it's not like they had a super slow Baron and was just like they couldn't even do it. Like, they could do it, but they just never were decisive at all with regards to, okay, we're going to turn here, or okay, we're playing for a pure finish. It was more kind of they made the call. And then I think as the Baron started ticking lower and lower, you could see the indecision in their minds. Like, I think always the way to clearly tell whether or not a team knows what they're doing when they're going for some Baron call like this is how committed they are to hitting the thing. I think it's the most obvious thing in the world. If a team just randomly starts hitting Baron, and then when it gets to like 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 HP, and they start just doing that, like the walking back and forth thing where you kind of want to start walking out of the pit. So if you get engaged on, then you're not going to be directly in the pit to get shit on by the Wombo, or you just full commit to it. And Golden Guardians, in both those cases, they had that where they were just kind of walking back and forth where the carries aren't hitting because they're trying to play for position, but the other members of Golden Guardians are full committing to the Baron. So it just felt like one of those calls to me where it's like, oh guys, like we have DPS hit Baron here, like let's just do it. But then they didn't make the decisive play to either stick it or play for the full turn, and I think that was the big problem there. So I think the call in itself wasn't bad, just that killer instinct, if you will, which I think we say Golden Guardians normally. That's kind of the thing. One of the tools in their toolbox is that they are very good at these split second plays, but didn't happen in this
Yeah.
series.
Yeah, and I don't mind if we just say, you know what, we can't pinpoint the player who's making the call, but you can blame the whole team because anyone could say, guys, we need to pull off Baron or we need to turn. Like anyone can do that. Anyone can. And the fact that there was no clear direction means like, yeah, you know what? Maybe it's not an individual player. Maybe it's just a team thing and they need to work on this now because you're going to run out of like they're going lower bracket so you can't fuck this up again, right? You can't make that happen twice. Still some great performances though, like River on the Jarvan. He had a great game.
Chef's kiss to
Dude,
that.
Kaisa, the Stixay Kaisa in the final game, they didn't win, but he was keeping that game alive with the kiting. And you kind of got to see like, well, first we were all kind of like, why is he not AP Kaisa? Because it seems to be a little bit better. And then you're like, oh, okay, I kind of see why he went AD Kaisa because he's actually really good at this champion. Rather than just playing a poke bot, he was just kiting the hell out of who was he kiting?
It was, I mean, what you're thinking of was contracts.
Okay, yeah,
The
and
player
he
you're
was just
thinking of
cutting
was
the hell out of
contracts.
contracts. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like you kind of see like, oh, okay, I get why he feels comfortable playing AD Kaisa. Like there were some really good performances out of Golden Guardians, even though their mid game throws were abundantly clear. They still had some good performances from some of their players. Licorice had a great series too.
I mean, Golden Guardians won every single early game.
You know,
I guess game two they didn't. Game two was quite even for the most part. No team really took a lead, but
I can't
Golden
even remember
Guardians
anymore.
won pretty much every single early game. And I think a lot of that was off the back of good laning because Ori was getting the better of Palafox in lane, like was getting the better of Dokla in lane. Bot lane was pretty even for the most part. Bot lane felt pretty AFK for the most part. Not that I think that that mattered because I think that sort of plays into both teams' hands. I think if you were to look at both of these teams versus other teams in the league, what they want is for their bot laners to just chill and hang out and farm, as opposed to the bot lanes of Cloud9 who always love to push and take Drakes and trying to think of other ones like TL who plays really lane dominant and tries to focus for laning advantage and plates. So felt like it was the perfect situation for both these bot lanes, and the majority of the early game just stemmed on the top side of the map, and then the mid and late game. I mean, I think a lot of it, sure, Golden Guardians made some mistakes, but I think all the credit in the world's got to go to NRG and Palafox specifically because Palafox was absolutely smurfing in the mid and late game of pretty much every single game.
Dude, it feels so good to see Palafox popping off, man. Like that guy has so many nice Azir plays. Holy shit. Oh my god, man. That guy is god, it feels good to see a guy like him finally make worlds. And it also really feels good that three academy players, right? Like Dokla, Contracts was in academy for god knows how long. Palafox was in academy for like that's such a cool story. I know I've been going on about this, but like I don't know, I just think it feels good, man. It feels nice to see them
Well, I mean,
show
Dokla,
up and pop
Dokla
off
Palafox had never gone to Worlds before, and contracts had only been once when he was on Cloud
since
Nine. And
2017.
I guess what FBI was there last year, and Ignar was
Yeah,
there in 2020.
with FlyQuest.
I think so. I don't think because he was on Immortals for a bit, so there's no way he made Worlds then.
Misfits. Everyone remembers Ignar
Oh, yeah,
Misfits
that's true.
2017 as well. But yeah. Um I thought it was really interesting the poke comp that they ran. How cancer was that, by the way?
Oh, in
Jace,
the
Nidalee,
yeah,
and
yeah, in
Kaisa?
the second game.
Oh my god, man. That is so annoying. I think Sven even said it on the cast, like, just watching, I'm getting annoyed, and I'm like, "Yeah, me too." Like it is disgusting. Also, Azale pointed out, like, you see these poke comps happen so much, and then there's one slip up and they throw. And NRG had that slip up. They did, but they managed to hold on and close out the game still, which I feel like Azale's totally right. You don't see those games from poke comps get closed out all that much. So many times you see like teams try to go full poke where they'll have three poke champions and like they just get hard engaged on and just die. This they actually pulled it off. They did not let Golden Guardians get their engage off, except for the one time. They let it happen once, but they didn't completely throw the game. And that was the only hiccup they had that whole game. They controlled the whole game and just closed it out. And it was like, you don't see this a lot from LCS poke comps. Maybe you do in LCK or LPL or something. Not in the
Yeah.
LCS, you don't.
The LCS special is for poke comps to throw once they're up, 6K gold or something.
Yeah.
The one that always sticks out in my mind for this is off topic, but there's like Cloud9 versus TSM in like season 9 where TSM was playing like Varus or something, and C9 was playing like Vladimir J4, and they just like they were down 8,000 gold and then just like won the game off of 2 team fights.
I don't remember that. That wasn't the game where Bjergsen was on a call. I know Akali's not a poke champion, but was it the Bjergsen flank?
No,
Is it that same series?
no, it's not. It wasn't a playoff series. It was just a game.
Oh,
But
okay. Gotcha.
I
Okay.
know I know the play or the game you're talking about, but it wasn't that game. Also, TSM won that game, so
Yeah. Anyways, I know this was not a clean series, especially from the side of Golden Guardians, but like coming into the series, we had a little discussion, you and I, about like just how good NRG is, and like I said, like I'm not sold on them. That's the reason why I broke up with them, right? Is because I think they're super inconsistent. I still love watching the team, and I'm still a fan, but like they are inconsistent. So like I'm not falling back in love again because, well, I mean, God knows what the hell is going to happen. Maybe they upset Cloud9. That's kind of what they're supposed to do.
yeah. I
Anyways,
mean, call me a hater, but I think you
you're not
replay
buying.
this and Golden Guardians just wins the majority of the time.
Okay, NRG JNT hater or JNT NRG hater rather.
Yes, yeah.
Good to know.
It's
Okay.
it's not. I mean, I think some of it is just due to their inconsistencies throughout the entire year. But I think in this series specifically, the fact that they lost pretty much every single early game and almost, they I shouldn't say they were completely AFK in the early game because they weren't, because they did a pretty good job of countering the plays that Golden Guardians was going for, or at least kind of coming out with, some sort of, a smidgen of something. Like it might be a 2-for-1 or a 2-for-2 or a 1-for-1. So energy was just on the back foot the whole time. And it's really not a good look against Golden Guardians and Cloud9, just because of how strong those teams are in the early game naturally.
I feel pretty confident that these two teams are actually top 3 after this series. I didn't feel that confident before. But
I
we'll have
don't
to see if EG
I
makes a lower
don't know if
run.
I agree with that.
We'll have to see if EG makes a lower bracket run or something like that. Um, okay, before we move on, what is it about NRG that like you why do you not have
I
confidence?
just
What holds you back? Is it that you think EG is actually really good, or is it just like NRG is
no,
not selling you because they're losing these early games?
I think pretty much everybody that's not Cloud9 is just continuously making a lot of glaring mistakes that continue to pop up game after game. Like you can throw all of EGTL, NRG and Golden Guardians in there.
Hmm.
I think if you're tier listing every team, Cloud9 is the only team that's in the top tier for me.
Yeah.
And I think there's a sizable gap.
Should we talk about that? Maybe we should hop to that series right now because yep. We talked about the possibility of Cloud9 just turning it on all of a sudden in playoffs. They did.
Yeah, they did.
Not
They
surprised. Okay, but let's not pretend this series was super clean because they were losing game 1 and 3, right?
Yeah, I think game one is, I think, a little bit. I would like to remind everybody I'm a Cloud9 fan, but I try to stay as unbiased as possible when talking about Cloud9. But I really think that Cloud9 in that first game was more about them just waiting for the perfect fight as opposed to them losing or falling behind. Because I think for the majority of the game, especially considering how low the kills were early on in the game, it was a lot of Cloud9 just not really getting the angle that they wanted and backing off most of the time. There was 2 drag fights and a Rift Herald fight where Evil Genius is kind of just, like, taking control of the map, and Cloud9 just realized, like, "Oh, we can't really fight this, so we're gonna take the small loss and kind of just wait for our opportunities later in the game." Because I think especially that game 1 was way different than what we saw for pretty much the entirety of the Golden Guardians versus NRG series, where it was just kind of them, like, bashing heads with each other. I thought game 1 specifically was, like, way more calculated on the side of Cloud9 in terms of picking their fights and choosing when to fight based on how good their situation was.
But you mentioned like they weren't able to find their fight, so they back off. Being able to find their fight is something Cloud9 has historically been really, really good at. And so you could say that either you could say like they've gotten worse at it, or you just got to give credit to EG for not allowing Cloud9 to find their fight,
I mean,
right?
maybe,
So
but
like
I think at the same time when they did find the fight, they won the game off it. Like they found their fight. They found 2 fights in a row basically,
they
and
did.
that was what won them a game. And
Yep. It's just it took to the very last second, but you're right. They did in game one specifically. Took to the very last second. They had the TP flank. EG didn't see it, and they get cleaned up.
plus, I
Uh,
mean, I also think that game 1 would go a lot differently if Fudge isn't doing idiotic things in team fights, which is just running in 1v5 multiple times. So
I didn't think Fudge's performance was as bad as you seem to think it was. I
he walked into an iron bush with vision on it, which had 5 people in it at one of those first
Which
dragon
one are we
fights.
talking?
It, it
Okay, we're
was it
talking
was
about
one of
the
the first
drag
dragon
fight
fights.
where
He just walked into 5 people. Walked
because there
melee range
was
into 5 people.
the one drag fight. I think we're talking about the same one. I wish I had a timestamp. I don't know what the timestamp was, but there was a drag fight where he's flanking coming from Raptors, right? Is that where you're talking about?
Yep.
EG, all on a dime, turn exactly at the same time and insta him. Like that to me was like, holy shit, EG is on the same page. So I looked at that fight and went, you know what? Fudge got erased trying to flank. But also, I was like, damn, EG know when they want to turn and they turn instantly.
I
So
I,
to
I
me, that
don't
wasn't like that bad of a like. I think that was Fudge trying to engage as the rest of his team collapses, kind of like a pinch maneuver. Just EG was instantly ready to fight their way out of it by one shotting the flank.
I don't disagree with you because you are correct. Like you are correct, but I think on the same side, Cloud9 should also be viewing it as the same way. When Fudge starts walking into, when Fudge starts walking up closely behind them, Cloud9 needs to be within engage range. And they
Yeah.
weren't. Like when you're mentioning Fudge walking in, none of Cloud9 is in range. No engage had even started. So like Fudge had already started to walk in where nothing had even happened on the opposite side with the 4C9 members.
So it probably should have been he engages like a half a second later as his team is like a slight timing issue, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean it's not like it's not game breaking or game losing, but it's a mistake that he made multiple times throughout the
Yeah.
game. I think in one instance, I think it's fine. It's not really, I'm not putting blame on Fudge for it happening one time, but it happened 3 times that game.
Yeah. I looked at it as more of like a wow, I'm impressed with EG rather than a Fudge, why would you flank sort of thing. Why would you not why would you flank, but your timing was bad. Um I guess we'll just have to disagree on that point, which is not a big deal. I do want to get to um obviously a lot of people know of like the revenge interview after last week's series. For those that don't remember, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said for all the people that are saying like if you camp JoJo, we just lose. He told people to fuck off or fuck you or something like that. Um and I kind of want to get into the conversation of are the doubters of EG right in saying like if JoJo's not carrying, does this team um just fall apart?
I mean, based on the evidence of EG matches throughout the entirety of Summer Split, it still kind of fits the bill. If JoJo is not 1v9ing the game, or is not, I shouldn't say 1v9 the game, but if JoJo isn't relevant within the game, EG can sometimes be, a struggle to watch. I mean, really the only exception in the entire split would be 2 of the playoff games from last week with Revenge, where we had the Jax game and the Aatrox game.
Yeah, so I was always and I have continued to be in the camp of like it's JoJo 1v9. I think we've been in that camp.
Yeah.
However, and yes, of course there are a couple of exceptions like you mentioned with the Jacks for example. But I would say even in their game 1, JoJo was getting Flame Horizoned mid and Unforgiven was popping off in that game. Like, he had a really nice Aphelios ulti where he flash ulted and he killed a couple of guys. Do you remember which play I'm talking about? Right in the
Yeah,
mid
yeah.
lane?
Hmm.
Like, so I looked at plays like that and I'm like, maybe I should agree with Revenge a little bit more. With that said, though, the number of times that we could count where it is somebody else doing the carrying, you could count on one hand.
Exactly.
So I think Revenge might still be wrong. But I guess it does, like when you had the Jax game last week and then the Aphelios game this week from Unforgiven. Maybe he has a point. I just think you got to show it more than like a handful of times before we actually believe you. You know?
Exactly. I think that's the point. Well, I don't doubt that Revenge and Armeo can carry games. We just haven't seen it enough for me to believe that that's a consistent way that EG can win. Apart from, you know, maybe a game or two in the spring in the regular season, this Aphelios game right here, and then two Revenge games from last week. No other ones really stick out in my mind. The ones that do are the multiple JoJo smurfing Ari performances, the couple first weeks of the split where JoJo was like destroying kids on Gragas and Silas, and then I don't know, he's just insane.
And I don't want to take away credit because there is some improvement. I guess about Revenge. I think there's definitely some improvement. I mentioned many times throughout the split that like I didn't think Revenge was playing that great. I thought he had improved from his Immortal days, but I didn't think he was all pro. Like a lot of people said he was snubbed all pro. To me, just no, he wasn't, in my opinion. Um, but in this series, when he was going up against Fudge, he played the same matchup twice and performed really well in the Renekton Aatrox. He played both sides, and I thought he outplayed Fudge in the laning phase, which to me is
I agree.
that is still an upgrade, right? Like that is also like there are areas where he deserves credit and all that. It's just I think he's getting a little bit ahead of himself as far as like the rest of the team needs to be respected more because honestly, I still think that well, evidently Cloud9 seemed to think so. The one game they just kept going after JoJo over and over again. Fudge even ran all the way from top as the Renekton
Yeah.
just to gank JoJo in the mid lane and put him behind. And so maybe Revenge doesn't think that, but the other teams seem to certainly think it.
I mean, game two was the prime example of shut JoJo down and you'll win the game.
Yeah.
That was what that game two was. I mean, the last thing that we should talk about from EG side of things was the fact that Armeo was starting the series as opposed to
Oh,
Shiden. Like, why did that happen? I'm quite confused as to why they made that decision.
I don't even mind that. I mean, like I didn't think Shaden was anything crazy. I did think he looked like, don't get me wrong, for a young player coming into the league and being a rookie and all that, I thought he did more than what should be expected of him. I just didn't think he was anything spectacular. I still think Armeo had a good split. Yes, towards the end, not as great, and that's probably why he got subbed out. But like towards the start of the split, I thought Armeo was playing really well. And even in game one, I thought he had a good game one on the Ivern. Mind you, there's not exactly a lot to show on the Ivern, right? Did you land your Qs? Yes. Okay, great. You had a good game, right? Other than that, you're just hitting shield on someone for the most part. But he was landing, when I was rewatching that game, he was landing a bunch of his Ivern Qs. So, like, I couldn't really fault him for how he played in game one. I could fault him for how he played in game two. But to me, it wasn't like crazy one way or another which jungler they went with. What was like crazy was how bad I felt for Armeo again being subbed out. Like this guy cannot go a split without being subbed in, subbed out, subbed in, subbed out. Like it happens all the time. It happened on Dignitas TSM because it was Grig and Acadian at the time. It happened with Team Liquid when Santorin had the headache stuff, and now it's happening again with EG. This guy just can't get through a full split, man. He can't. He can't do it.
I mean, to me, it's just confusing from the perspective that he played the last week of the regular season and he played the entirety of EG's first playoff series against TSM, and I thought looked pretty good in that series. So,
We're talking about Shaden here, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
like
Shaden. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he finished playing the regular season for EG and played well in the playoff match, and clearly, I think um, can be sometimes more useful to what EG wants to do in the games than Armeo, considering that, I mean, this is kind of, I'm kind of assuming a little bit here, talking about the listening to Sneaky Meteos talk on the co-streams, because Meteos was talking about how, you know, he's pretty good friends with Armeo, and he thinks that Armeo doesn't really like to play the sort of the bitch jungle style of playing
Live around
tank.
JoJo.
Well, just the style of playing tank utility, very low economy. Meteos kind of
Okay.
was talking a lot about how Armeo doesn't like to play that style and how that style is more seeming to be effective on Shiden. So I don't know. I wonder if EG was having more problems the past couple of weeks in scrims and they decided to switch it up again, or who knows, maybe it's still a situation where both players have still been given 50-50 scrim time and Armeo had been playing better or something. So I can understand from that perspective if they were still both scrimming and Armeo was playing better and felt more comfortable in the team, that makes sense. But from the gameplay standpoint of what we've been seeing from EG over the last couple of weeks, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
It would be really interesting to be a fly on the wall in EG scrim room, you know? Just to see like what those discussions are like. What's pretty clear is they don't feel super comfortable in either one, or else they would just perma be starting one jungler. It seems like they got a problem in the jungle that they don't know how to fix, and so they keep trying something else. I didn't mind. So for the record, I didn't mind that they put in Shaden after Armeo had a bad game too on the Sedge. It's just I felt bad for Armeo. It's not like, oh, Armeo deserves to play. He had a bad Sedge game, right?
I
That
think
was.
it Honestly, for EG, I think it was just unlucky the way that game one went because I felt like it gave them confidence to continue with Armeo in game two. I think if it was the case where EG just went out and got completely shit on in game one, they would have subbed out Armeo for Scheiden right then and there.
Hmm.
But I think they kind of actually got unlucky in the fact that they were playing a pretty good game one for the most part, keeping it even, and were a little bit ahead of Cloud9 in the late game, and then they lost that game. So it's like, okay, well, we just kind of played well, so like, let's keep it the same. And then, oh shit,
You think they
we just got
go?
dicked, so let's go put Scheiden back in.
You think they're back on the Shaden train and they go him next series, or do
I
you think they
mean,
go back to Armeo? Flip a coin.
I would go to Shaden if
Flip
I
a
had to
coin at
pick.
this point. I mean, I don't know because I haven't seen enough about Shaden. Haven't seen enough to really, you know.
I'm
Couple other guys we have to talk about. First, MNS didn't have the greatest split in our opinion. He was not an all pro, or he shouldn't have been an all pro in our opinion. And he showed up this series. Mind you, got hard camped and had an unlucky level one in game three, right? So it wasn't perfect. But dude, games one and two, like this guy absolutely showed up. And we talked about how we think JoJo's the engine to the EG team. He shut down that engine pretty quick. I'm not a mechanic here, but maybe he put some diesel in there or something. I don't know. I don't know engines, but he made it not good.
Yeah, M&S had a really good series. Is game one. I mean, game one was all about Berserker and M&S in terms of them, playing, walking that line of being able to just deal enough damage and then walk out when the enemy tries to approach you. And so, from just a pure mechanics perspective, that game one was just like pretty special to watch. I think
Yeah.
people think about the JDG versus BLG game, that like 4v5 way back at MSI finals, where like JDG is like walking that exact line of hitting them and not getting hit, and they're 4v5 winning the fight. That felt like that was game one from this Cloud9 EG series with the Ashe and the LeBlanc. But the Koreans were absolutely annihilating the enemy team.
Thank you, Vapire, for the sub. Much appreciated. Yeah, okay. And also his Gragas was so God, his Gragas was so
I was
clean,
surprised
by
we
the way.
saw it, that we just saw Gragas as a pick, because it's really fallen off lane Gragas after the passive
Been a
nerfs and
while.
whatnot.
Yeah, been a while since we've seen that one, and it did not disappoint. I want to see it again, man. It was fucking good. The last thing that I want to talk about, you mentioned Berserker. I want to talk about him a little bit more because it felt like
Game
we
three,
didn't see
Ezreal.
that many carry performances out of Berserker in the regular split. Now we all knew that he was still super good and he was still first all pro, blah 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 blah. But like game 3 was just, it showed the weapon that Cloud9 has, where if things are going wrong at other parts of the map, you have that guy that will pick up your team. Berserker was that guy that picked up the team when it was needed. And if you want to look at it as more of a negative side of things, you could also say Unforgiven, you guys were winning on the rest of the map. All you needed to do was not die in lane. And then Berserker just, he went for the 1v1. Berserker hard outplayed him, landed everything on Ezreal. And then that was when you knew, like, oh shit, Cloud9 is not out of this game. And of course they came back because he hard carried that Ezreal game.
I didn't even think
He
it
was
was
hitting
that.
everything, man.
I didn't even think it was that bad from Unforgiven. He just didn't get the passive auto. Like he would have won that fight if he got that passive auto off. And
No, but here's why
Berserker.
it's bad, because you don't need to go for risky plays when you're winning everywhere else on the map. Like C9 was so far behind mid, they were camping the fuck out of MNS. JoJo was up a bunch of CS and kills. Like you don't need to go for those plays and give the one guy that can 1v9 for Cloud9 a chance to carry the game,
I,
right?
you're not wrong. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I think it was a little bit of unluckiness, in totality.
And maybe we're not even talking about this if Berserker just misses one Ezreal Q, except he didn't fucking miss
Mhm.
any of them the whole goddamn game. And so Unforgiven is probably like, holy shit, man. I thought I could take a 1v1 against this guy. I paid the price for it dying once, and then the guy just took over the whole game. I bet you Unforgiven is like, oh my god, I am going to look at Berserker completely differently now.
Yeah, I mean, it was the
Sheesh.
what's even the way to describe it? Just the snowball effect of like EG had a pretty good start to that game. They were up like 4 kills, or it was like 4-1 in kills, and then Berserker gets that 1v1, gets them back into the game a little bit. And then like 4 or 5 minutes later is the MNS play where they try to engage on in bot lane, and he somehow runs it all the way out and TP's away at 1 HP with the Sejuani just in front of his face, and then
That's when you knew. That's
yeah,
when you knew it was like, oh shit.
that's when I knew at least that the game was over and it was 3-0. Was once Eminus got out with that TP, it's like, oh my god, that's a tilter.
Yeah.
Like that
I
that
think
would that would tilt me infinitely if I was playing the game right there, and that was bad by Unforgiven. If I want to say that was bad. He was the
Shaden fucked that
biggest.
up too on the
No,
sedge. He
I
jumped over
mean
the wall. No,
they bo-
Shaden fucked
they
that up
they
too.
both played it bad, but Unforgiven played it worse.
Really? I think if Shaden just doesn't queue over the wall and miss, like he just cuts him off. He can't run through.
Okay, well,
Like
well,
Unforgiven's on
okay,
one side
I
of the
agree.
alcove and Shaden's on the other if he just runs over there.
I agree. So why didn't
Yeah.
Unforgiven do that then? What would
Unforgiven was on the bottom side of the alcove.
well they
Shaden, instead of running to the top side of the alcove, queued over
no,
and
but
missed.
Unforgiven also then followed him into the whole bottom of the alcove instead of walking around. Like they didn't play the angle there, but both
Yeah.
both of them played it
Anyways,
bad. It was
it
both
was
bad.
embarrassing.
It
It was
was
really embarrassing.
it was hilarious as fuck though.
It was hype. Yeah, it was hype though. Yeah, that's for sure. Anything else on this series?
Um, we got
We could talk
a.
Sven, I guess. Sven didn't have the greatest series in
I
my
didn't think it,
opinion.
I think apart from the shitty like W's into the wall, I thought for the most part his series was pretty decent. He had a really
I
good
thought he
Brom
had a
game.
bad series.
He
I
had
thought the Brom game he had a couple of nice cues where like it ended up securing some kills, but in every game he got caught out at least once. Every single game.
I don't know. He made the fatty game winning play in game 3.
He even said on the broadcast today, he's like, I can't believe we won with how bad I played yesterday. He's like, that's how we know that we're gonna win. It's like if I could play that bad and we could still 3-0. But anyway, I'll keep my eye on Sven. I think he can bounce back. What's the next series, Jinter?
Well, yeah, moving to the lower bracket, we had 100 Thieves versus Team Liquid. Now, if I remember from our last week's episode going into the series, I remember having zero confidence in either of these teams because of how poorly they had been playing as of late. And I think going into the series, and even while watching the series, I think that still reigns true
Yeah,
because
that's what you're gonna say.
because I don't think either team looked good at all.
um,
I shouldn't say looked good at all, but I think TL, despite winning the series, still didn't look, particularly clean per se.
Yeah, I think I agree. The reason why I'm hesitating and why I'm struggling is because there are some plays that are coming to mind where like Summit walks into 100 Thieves and gets like a 3 or 4 man cannon ulti, but at the same time, 100 Thieves, you see the cannon walking towards you. It wasn't a flank or anything. They just let it happen. And
Yeah.
so when there's plays like that, I'm like, can I really give credit for Summit getting that 3 or 4 man cannon ulti when like 100 Thieves should see it and just not stand still? And let it happen. You know what I mean? It's a bit of a head scratcher. So I think I agree with you. Whereas like I came out of this series with sort of the same conclusion as last week that like I don't really trust this team.
Well, I mean, and with the game one, like, I'm sorry, but how does 100 Thieves not win that game? Like,
Okay,
they
Core
just.
JJ 5 head Baron call. I'm not 100% sure it was Core JJ. It was the vision sneak. People will know what I'm talking about
But I
if they
mean,
were
that
watching the
that
game.
didn't win them the game by any
No,
means
but that swung
whatsoever.
it.
Like,
That's what swung momentum though. So you're right. That didn't close out the game. That wasn't like, oh, game over. But like things are going perfectly fine for 100 Thieves and a random Baron just because Core JJ, I think it was him, still pretty sure, was the one that saw the vision. Core is on, I think it was on Rakan. He I noticed he was the one that was in the river when the wards were placed. And someone pings the ward, so I'm like, it's probably Core. And they clearly knew where the vision was because even Pioshik flashed over the pit to dodge the like that is clearly a play that they're like, we know we're not spotted here. Let's go for this. I'm pretty sure it was Core that spotted it. And so I want to give credit to him for making the call. Whoever made the call gets the credit. I just think it was Core. And you got to give credit for like, guys, we need to make something happen. This game isn't going our way. They made something happen. So I thought that was a really five head play. Not every play is flashy. Sometimes it's just outthink them.
I mean, I think just from the 100 Thieves perspective, it just felt like a team who had no confidence in themselves. That's what I thought watching this series almost the entire
Yeah.
time is they had, I mean, again, I'm kind of assuming here that they probably just started to lose trust and confidence in each other throughout the entirety of the split, just based on how everything was going. They weren't winning their stage games. I think it's pretty safe to assume that they probably weren't, playing extremely well in scrims, considering we haven't heard anything about them, and they haven't really been making any improvements. So it felt like to me that 100 Thieves still had the tools to win the series, but they just didn't trust enough in themselves to really go for it. Like when you look back at the Golden Guardians versus NRG series, and I kind of talked about them like banging heads against each other, it's because both those teams had the confidence and had the cojones to go in and try to win fights. And 100 Thieves was asleep at the wheel basically, especially in that first game.
There was a couple of like big red flags for me that like you knew this wasn't going to go well. Um the first one is when TL has a lead and the casters say the game is over. That's a big one cuz TL has thrown how many games this split? Like 40. They only played 18 but they threw every single one maybe twice. Um that's never a good sign. Even with like Azael and who's he casting with? They were all like, "Yeah, this game is over." Maybe it was Kobe. I think it might have been Kobe it was Kobe or Jet that was like, maybe it's not over. But like they were saying it's over, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe they're saying this about a Team Liquid game. Because I'm sitting there like, nope, I'm not saying it's over. It's not, but it actually was. They actually played it out perfectly fine. That's how over the game was. So that's red flag number one. Red flag number two is Doublelift gets 3 kills on the Kaisa by 3 minutes, and they struggle to close out that game. That's when like even when they won that game, I was like, oh, they're not going to win this series. Like Doublelift gets 3 kills on Kaisa at 3 minutes, and they still struggle the rest of the game to win. Like they're not winning this series. So those are two really, really big red flags to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard what else to say from the 100 Thieves side because, like I said, I don't think that they were necessarily playing bad by any means. I just think that when
They
it
don't do
really
anything,
just
man.
when push came to shove, they didn't commit. They didn't make a decision.
It is pretty crazy that you could go a whole split and playoffs and you still never do anything. That is pretty wild, especially and Doublelift said this in his interviews. He's like, there's some times where like it should be obvious what we need to do, and I just don't have the answer. That is something that's surprising, which I always appreciate his honesty for that. But that is telling. Like Doublelift, who's played the
Yeah.
game for so many years, saying like, there's just some situations where I don't know what to do.
And I mean, I
That's
wonder how much of a part Bjergsen not being there in Summer Split plays into that effect because I mean, he's the player that is going to have those answers and is going to make those decisions. And if Doublelift is saying that he's not the one who's prepared to make those split second decisions, then who on 100 Thieves possibly can? I'm assuming it's not the non English speakers in Someday and Quid, and it's for sure as hell not closer based off what the hell we've been watching this split, and it damn sure
yeah.
isn't Busio. So nobody. It's nobody.
If there's one thing that made me feel good about watching 100 Thieves lose, because there wasn't much. Like honestly, I want 100 Thieves to still be in it. To be honest, like I think the league is just more fun when Doublelift is playing. Let's be frank. I think a lot of people agree with that. But if there's one thing that made me feel good about 100 Thieves losing, is that I hope people do look at like, oh, this team wasn't amazing with Bjergsen. Even Bjergsen didn't have that great of a split last split, but the difference without him is very, very apparent. Like very, very apparent.
It feels
That's one
like
thing where,
more of
like, it
the
felt dude, it was crazy to me to see how quick people jumped off the Bjergsen hype train just because he was no longer 1v9 MVP GOAT Bjergsen. Like, he was still a solid mid laner. Yes, he wasn't amazing, but, like, you can't tell me that he was just bad all of a sudden. There's no way. And the fact that he left the team and they got significantly worse and couldn't make anything happen, I think says a lot.
it feels like it's all those intangibles that they lost with the departure of Bjergsen that made it so difficult for this team to succeed in summer.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's probably very difficult when your mid laner, probably one of the most important players on their team when it comes to the role in the game that they're playing, is a young player playing in his first split professionally on a tier one team in a new region. Doublelift has actively talked about, playing with young players and how much it takes to introduce those players into the competitive environment. So obviously that didn't help them. So
Yeah.
kind of going back to the Doublelift conversation, why I fully expect his next team to be on to be one that has no rookies.
Yeah. Again, I could still see one, but I think I'm more in your boat where I think it's less likely to happen. But I could still see a world where he's like, I don't mind playing with Busio again. Busio was probably a guy that I could see him, kind of taking under his wing, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, on the TL side of things, they like to split a lot, which I think is okay. But we can't ignore that they've had trouble splitting this split. That's a weird sentence. That okay, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? Because we talked about it a million times. Summit gets caught out in the side lanes a lot. Now they had success in this particular series, but if there's anyone that's not going to be able to answer a split push, it's 100 Thieves because they can't seem to make anything happen. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, TL pulled off the split push pretty well in this series. I'm not sold that they can continue to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton of faith that they'll be able to run games through the side lanes, especially since the teams that they're going to be going up now, further into the playoffs, you look at the top laners they're playing, and it's all the best top laners that are kind of left. Summit's going to be leaning against, if TL continues to push forward in the playoffs, it's going to be Fudge, Licorice, Rich, and Revenge, who for the most part are all pretty good laners. I think the only one who I wouldn't group into that category who's not that great at laning, I mean specifically this split, is Dokla. Dokla's been pretty weak the majority
Yep.
of this split, but he's going to have tough top lane matchups throughout the rest of the playoffs, and I do not think that TL is going to have that same recipe for every single team remaining in the playoffs. Now, I think they are going to have to figure out how to win some games through other ways because you look at some of the other roles on Team Liquid, maybe APA, where
Yep.
he didn't have a great. I mean, he played all right this series, but there was a couple games where he wasn't doing fantastic, but he
Yeah,
definitely
he
played better than he
struggled to
did
me.
last week.
sh- I agree. It's except that for me, the bar was set so low. Like, I I want to be clear. Like, I don't expect much out of a guy who's just a rookie that started playing in the LCS 2 or 3 weeks ago or whatever it is now, right? Like, it's same thing with Shaden, right? I don't expect much out of. However, he has struggled very clearly since the playoffs have started. I do still agree with you that he looked better this week, but I wonder what happens if he does get the Casio, right? He played a couple Casio games. We know that Ziggs was one of his better picks. That seems to be getting permabanned. What happens if he's not on Ziggs or Casio? Because he played a fair bit of Tristana. It was very hit or miss. Kind of a lot of inting on the Tristana, for being honest, since
Some
playoffs have started. And then there was the
some
Jace.
jumping into multiple people.
The Jace wasn't great either. So like, I wonder if teams really start to target ban him even more and how much of a problem that's going to be for Team Liquid.
I mean, considering what I was talking about with the quality of top laners across the rest of the league for the playoffs, I would expect teams to go after APA in the mid lane, whether it's early in the game to set him behind or taking away his most comfortable champions. So I think, similar to EG, you can implement some type of a game plan like that. Shut down the mid, and it's going to really limit TL's options if Summit cannot get ahead and push that advantage in the top lane. Because I'm not expecting that it's going to be so likely for TL to just do that without any jungle interference. Because Summit, he'll get a lead versus any top laner, with jungle help and whatnot like that.
There's a good chance he
It
does, right?
yeah. But in a case where there's going to be no jungle intervention and it's just pure 1v1, I don't think that Summit's going to just roll all these top laners like he
Yeah.
has been for the most part in the regular season.
I'm going to reiterate a little bit of what I was saying last week when it comes to the APA stuff. I don't think that he is necessarily an LCS level top laner. At least he hasn't been in the playoffs. And I think we saw some not LCS level mistakes The Tristana where he just jumps in and then Quid just free shuffles him under tap. There's no reason to jump there on Tristana. That is a rookie mistake. He TP'd right into 100 Thieves and just gave over a free death, and then then 100 Thieves snowballs that game through that. Like these are clear mistakes where like these are not LCS level mistakes. Not when they happen in abundance, right? It happens every once in a while to everyone, but like there's so many different plays that you could point to that
It's
I'm a
just
little bit
pretty
worried.
obvious
And
rookie mistakes, and that's not a
yes,
surprise.
but it's not exactly fair to him. I want to be more fair because it's not fair to ask a new player to go in and just perform, especially in playoffs, right? It's not fair that he's on the clock and needs to learn quick, but he's on the clock and needs to learn quick. You're running out of time to learn how to play with, by the way, a roster that doesn't speak fucking English. It's the situation that he's in is not fair. So I want to acknowledge that, but I also want to acknowledge that he is a weak link right now, and it's standing out a lot in playoffs.
Agree. Definitely agree.
What's the next series? We got Dig versus somebody.
Dig versus TSM feels kind of forgotten at this point, but don't forget this was also quite the banger. 5 game series, win all 5 games. Dig ends up coming out on top. Rest in peace to Insanity. He
Oh
was our other
man,
he was the other protagonist. If we want to say Doublelift was one of the
yeah.
protagonists and one of the big storylines, Insanity was the other big storyline of the playoffs, I felt like.
It felt bad to see things end specifically for the players that like we think improved a lot and showed they belong. It feels bad because TSM, I mean, technically we don't know this for 100% certainty, but TSM is supposedly leaving the LCS, right? That's all the discussion is like this was the last time we're going to see TSM play because they announced that they're leaving. The only reason why I say we don't know for sure yet is because TSM has announced a lot of shit before that just has not happened, right? Let's be clear about that. But it seems likely that this team is no longer existing, and you have three players in my mind that performed more than well enough to be on an LCS team next year. But as of right now, they are teamless, being Boogie, Insanity, and Chime. And I think that's what felt so bad about this series is those guys don't get to move on. Where I think they had great splits and great playoffs.
Yeah, it definitely feels kind of sad for them just because of how much they turned it around. Because let's not forget, a lot of people, ourselves included, had TSM as the 10th ranked team going to the
Yep.
summer split. And I think that everyone was surprised by TSM's rapid improvement from spring to summer and I shouldn't say dominance, but the strong performances from Insanity in the mid lane. He did make the All Pro team, right? No, he didn't.
No, M&S
Oh
did.
man, it just reminded me. Fuck those guys. He should have been on the All Pro team.
I mean, it was him or Palafox. One of them got snubbed.
I think my pick was Insanity, but still.
Yours was Palafox.
I was Palafox?
Yeah.
Really?
Mine was Insanity.
Well, I mean,
It
really?
wasn't M&S, we could agree on that.
Yeah, it wasn't M&S, that's for damn sure.
Um, to be clear, all of the 3 players that we just mentioned, the Boogie, Chime, Insanity, they still came with their weaknesses. I don't wanna pretend like they played flawless and just came out on the bottom. No, they all got picked at their own times. They all that actually seems to be, like, TSM's big problem, is a lot of them just get picked off stranding, just walking around randomly. Like, that is the clear weakness for me, especially for a player like Chime. Like, Chime, he will find the fight. That's why I give this guy so much praise is he finds his flank, he finds the fight. He's a great engaged, especially on Rakan. He's fantastic. His set was great. There's definitely the strengths are his engaging and finding fights. But his weakness is that like a lot of times he'll just go off on his own looking for vision and he'll just get picked off. And the same thing happens with Insanity. He was walking through the river one time and he got picked off when he was playing the Xerath game. He got scooped by Azir or whatever. Um, so like there's definitely weaknesses from these guys. I like there's a reason why they got knocked out. It just feels bad that like they performed to me much better than what is they finish on the split like 7-8 now, tied for 7th because they got knocked out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
Like
what
they
that's.
deserve better.
Yeah, I don't know how the tiebreakers work, but
Yeah.
they were in 5 games instead of 100 Thieves going 4 games, so maybe that puts them as the 7th seed in terms of how they finished. But definitely feels deserving in terms of their improvements, but also at the same time feels kind of sad that it's over already.
Yeah. And those three players we highlight, but I actually thought that there was still some standout plays from Turtle and Haunter as well. I didn't like Haunter's rumble last week. I thought he had a lot better of a rumble this week. I think it was game two. I can't
I mean,
remember what game it was,
I
man.
flamed
Like
Hanser pretty much the entire split, and I thought in the playoffs he actually played a lot better.
I
Both.
can't remember which game it was, but there was one game where his rumble looked really solid, and I was like, okay, this is definitely an improvement. And then Turtle makes the huge outplay when he was playing the Kaisa and he got dove 2v1. He outplays them. Like there's
That was
some
like half of
good
an
stuff.
outplay, half of a misplay from the other side.
I he played it perfect though. He cleansed when he needed to. He flashed the feathers. What more can you ask for?
I
You could say
guess.
Kaisa's broken because Kaisa gets to just dash, but
Yeah, I mean,
sure,
I guess you're not wrong, but it just felt like that guy should have died.
maybe.
But yeah, I mean, he did play it perfectly.
Yeah. All this to say, there's all things to look at for TSM players, and like there's some feel good stuff. It's just unfortunately the team wasn't good enough, and it's just that simple. If we want to cope, and TSM, let's say diehard TSM fans, plug your ears for a second. Since Reggie tweeted out "good riddance," they have not won a match, and that makes me feel a little warm and fuzzy inside. They've won individual games, right? Their series went to 5 games, but they were winless throughout the rest of the regular split, and then they lost both of their playoff series. And I mean, J&T, does that make you feel better? It makes me feel better.
I mean, anytime that we get to clown on Reggie, it's a good time, so I'm all for it.
That part made me feel a lot better about it. I want to switch over to Dig, but before we do, I just want to ask from the TSM players, which ones do you think will be on a team next year, and which ones do you think deserve to be on a team? Because maybe you think like, oh, this guy deserves, but no one's going to pick him up because LCS needs imports. Lol.
I mean, I feel
Who
like
are
you
your
could
picks?
maybe slot Chime into there that he deserves, but he might not get picked up.
Okay,
And I think part of the reason why I'm saying that is because I feel like despite both of us and some other people in the scene giving him a lot of praise, in terms of the overall perception of the league and just sort of what I see, there's not really a lot of general praise going on for Chime. It's more just the people who notice him notice that he's doing really well, as opposed to just the general blanket statement that, oh, Chime is just playing really well.
I have heard some things. More lately, actually. I think even on broadcast they mentioned Chime as like kind of being snubbed for support, which I was surprised to hear that, not because I didn't agree, but because I didn't hear anyone praise Chime throughout the whole damn split. I thought it was just you and I. But we clearly missed something because on the broadcast, I think it was either Mark or Azale, one of them brought it up that, like, yeah, you know what? Chime actually had a good split and he might have been snubbed from All Pro. So I think slowly other people are actually starting to recognize that Chime is pretty good. I think most likely pick for me to have a team next year is actually Chime, then Insanity, and then Boogie's an import. So
Yeah, I mean, feels like Insanity's got to be on the team, mostly because he's an NA resident, and that frees up an import slot for a team, and he also just played really well. I mean,
So
it's
you think Insanity is more likely to have a team than Chime?
yeah.
Maybe that has something to do with mid lane as well, right? Like
I mean, his
maybe
role
like
is more important,
Quid
so yeah.
Quid might be gone. Balulu maybe could be gone. Harry or APA might not have a team. Like I could see that happening. Vikla should be gone. So maybe Insanity is more likely.
And I mean, I still think Boogie should be on a team for sure. I thought in terms of underrated players throughout the whole split, I'd say Boogie was probably the number one for me. I don't remember people talking about him at all. And this
Mm.
guy was just having really good early games pretty much the entire year. Didn't have the greatest series here against Ignitas. I thought if you do want to sort of pinpoint one of the players that was actually underperforming, I think I'd actually have to pick Boogie because we did see some better things out of the struggling players from the regular season in both Haunter and Wild Turtle. Insanity still played pretty well. Chime, yeah, but I mean, unfortunately, Boogie didn't play as well as he had been. But I think I'm pretty confident saying that he'll be on a team for next year, whether that's in NA or whether that's in a minor region or even a academy, LPL, LCK, or even one of those types of teams. A
Um.
PSG talent type of team you could be even go to. Feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yep. Not. It doesn't just have to be LCS. You're right. On the dig side of things, was there any standout players for you?
Jensen keeps playing well. I mean, this
Yep.
guy hasn't missed Worlds, so if we're following the script, Dig's going to Worlds and Jensen's going to be there. So
we talked about this a little bit. Let's just air this out. At what point do we take the Jensen Worlds narrative seriously?
Probably now, because he's 2 series wins away from going to Worlds. So
Okay, but what
felt
if
like it
I
was a bit
told
more of
you
a meme that it was Dig was still not playing that well in the regular season, and Jensen wasn't playing that well. And then yeah, sure, they're the 7th seed going to playoffs, but now they just won a series and they only got 2 more to go, so they could do
I
it.
would have said now if they're not playing Golden Guardians. They're playing Golden Guardians.
But
That's
I
my
mean,
problem here.
so you think if they
The-
had EG, it's way more likely?
or TL, but obviously that couldn't. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
I think Golden Guardians is the best team out of the 4 teams alive in the bottom bracket. Let's just put it that way. I still think Dig would definitely be an underdog to EG as well. I don't want to make it sound like I think EG is free wins for Dig. I just think it's really hard to buy into this narrative when, to me, I still think Golden Guardians is the second best team in the league. Maybe I shouldn't think that after they lost to NRG. I don't know. I just think for Dig, it's an uphill battle. Like it was already an uphill battle. I think they're pretty upset seeing the Golden Guardians fall into their bracket. They would have much rather gone up against the extremely volatile, never know what you're going to get NRG team.
I mean, Golden Guardians kind of fits that bill a little bit as well. Volatile, don't know what you're gonna get. Like that's a bit of Golden Guardians there. You know,
They did
they're
finish
not
13-6
yeah,
though.
but they're not completely absolved of what we saw in the spring split and what even just happened in this NRG
Yeah,
series. So,
you're right. You're right.
but
Okay, so
don't get
what
me
kind of
wrong, Golden Guardians is the favorite of the teams in the lower bracket. They're probably gonna get
yeah.
out. But yeah, yeah.
I kind of want to give a little bit of credit to Diggs bot lane. I didn't think they were like spectacular, but I definitely wrote them off as like the biggest reason why I didn't think this team would move on. But I thought they
It's
played a lot better.
it's
So
funny.
like,
It's funny you say that because I thought that Diggs bot lane started getting progressively worse in the series because I thought they started
oh,
off playing really well. But no, I still thought they played well overall. But I just thought that they started off playing great and then they kind of just got like worse and worse over the course of the series, especially in
maybe I'm
lane.
just thinking about like the clutch play because I'm thinking about like Tomo picking off Turtle with the feathers when like they're down and out, and like that was a really clutch play to flash pull the feathers back. I don't know what game that was. I can't remember anymore. I don't remember the timestamp either. But do you know what play I'm talking about when TSM is sieging and Turtle just randomly
Um,
dies because Tomo pulls the feathers and flashes?
no, you know.
No, yeah. It was a clutch play. They killed Turtle instantly, and it started swinging things in their way. Um, and honestly, they just didn't die in lane every single fucking game. So it's a big plus. They might have died
That was
in
well.
one of the
It's that
games.
started happening in game 4, game 5. That's why I say that
Oh,
they were
okay.
playing better early on in the series than in the later parts because
Mm,
their deaths were racking up in the last 2 games, especially Poom. At least
mm.
in that game 4. Game 4 was holy Poom was running it.
Uh, they played that Triss Ziggs game. I remember that. That was kind of stupidly disgusting. I think that
The
was just
OG,
pretty
that's
much
the OG C9 comp right there.
that was just Jensen and Santorin winning mid jungle really hard, and then they took Herald and just had Ziggs rotate mid and execute the tower with W and Herald. Like that game to me was just like, yeah, it was Tristana and Ziggs taking the towers, but to me that game was won through mid jungle, just being able to get Herald. You charge in the Herald, and then once Herald is charged, hey Ziggs, come on over and execute this thing, right? We just need to tap it a couple times, and then it explodes, and then suddenly the game snowballed so damn hard.
Yeah.
I don't really got much else on this series. Rip TSM. This might be the last. Let's be real. This isn't the last time we talk about TSM. We'll find a way.
Definitely,
Um,
definitely not the last time we'll be talking about TSM, but likely the last official game we've seen out of TSM.
games. Before we close out the TSM stuff, we actually didn't do our. God, we gotta stop calling them obituaries. They're not obituaries at all.
Well,
But
I have
they're
them written down right here as next up.
okay. So let's do TSM since we're talking about them. They're dead. What this is about for those that are new to the podcast is we always give a score of 1 to 10 based off of their expectations for themselves coming into the season. So into the year rather. So coming into spring split, you have a roster, and how did your year go? For me, they didn't really put any effort into their roster. They kind of did the same thing in summer as well. They swapped Hanser for Solo. Did they do anything else that I'm forgetting?
Nope. I mean, Turtle came in for Neo like back towards the middle of spring, but
Yeah.
that was the only, in terms of differences, that was the only difference really.
So I think for themselves, they probably came in with really low expectations this year. Um, and it wasn't pure disaster everywhere. So maybe you got to give a little bit of credit. Oh, insanity, duh, for Maple, right?
Well, I know you said you started off this talking about spring split, but we do it every split, so
Oh, okay. Anyways, my score for TSM is actually a 4. I
uh,
think it's hard to have a high number. I can't go 5 or higher when you're still just getting knocked out in both of your playoff series in summer, and the season just ends. But I don't think they put much effort at all into these rosters. So it's like, considering they put up fights in both of their series before getting knocked out, I'll give them a 4.
well, this is awkward because I gave him an 8 because they did put so little effort, and everybody thought that this was going to be the 10th place team, and then they actually ended up pretty good. And you could
But it's
argue that
TSM though.
that doesn't matter.
It's still TSM. Like
It doesn't
there's
matter.
still like some. There's actually, you're right. There is no TSM pride left, or else they would have tried to put together a decent roster.
Yeah. Well, I think for the same reasons I'm giving them an 8 because they came into this split with absolutely no expectations to perform whatsoever. Everybody assumed this was going to be the worst team in the league by a decent margin. People thought, and that's the crazy part is people thought that this team was going to be worse than Immortals, and that is saying something. That is saying something that you thought that your team was
Yeah,
going to be worse than Immortals, and the fact that they came out of it on the other side with players that are going to be desirable for the next offseason, especially Insanity. Maybe not necessarily that we're talking about this from the TSM side of things, but the TSM players side of things, like this is a great split for all of them.
yeah,
And for anything, if this was TSM, guess what? Your send off last split ever wasn't 10th place dog shit. It was actually like, okay, we actually had some highlights from this past split.
yeah.
They're getting a nice
Okay,
8 from me.
okay. I'm not changing my score still, but
That's fine.
I see your argument. I guess. From the Hundred Thieves side of things,
Yeah, they're not gonna get as high a score, I think.
there was some people, us included, power ranking them in the top half. I don't
I
remember
had them
where I power ranked
4. I
them.
think we
I
both
think I
had
had
them
them
4.
5. I think
Pretty
I had
sure
them
we both
5.
had them 4.
I would have had C9, Golden Guardians, um, FlyQuest. I think I had FlyQuest 3. Did I have NRG 4?
I'm like almost 100% certain that you had a 100 Thieves 4 because that was the only one minus Cloud9 that we had as the same, I think.
Needless to say, they underperformed big time. And honestly, not only did they get knocked out super quick in playoffs, they finished 8th, which they barely squeaked in, and they did nothing the whole damn split. So, yeah. Oh my god, we did both have them 4.
So I'm telling you, well, if I'm going to give them a score, I'm going to give them a 2. And a lot of that has to do with one, the sudden retirement of Bjergsen, and then the immediate shift to quit in the mid lane and then deciding to drop tenacity to bring in someday. And I think part of the reason my lower score is so low as opposed to not like a 3 or a 4, and I think that does stem from the failure to transition out of the Bjergsen phase. And that's not necessarily all on 100 Thieves, because by all accounts, they were not expecting Bjergsen to retire. It seemed like a pretty big shock to both themselves and the whole league. So, but the fact that they struggled so hard in that switch from Bjergsen to Quid, and then getting rid of tenacity to bringing in someday, the whole thing just it failed. And in all honesty, I think Busio is a guy who didn't necessarily live up to his expectations. I don't think that Busio was bad by any means, but I think that coming into the year and even summer split, people thought that Busio was going to be able to build on what they had from spring split and play a lot better in summer. And I think he didn't play as well as he did in summer than he did spring. So pretty
Yeah.
pretty big disappointment, I think, for 100 Thieves all together.
I'm gonna give them a 2 as well, but to me, it's less about Busio because I actually thought their bot lane was okay.
That was
Maybe
just
out of
one of the
lane,
reasons. That wasn't the whole
maybe
reason.
even yeah, maybe even out of lane. Honestly, Busio probably could have had more of an impact because, like, when you look at when we talk about this team being completely or like just not being proactive whatsoever, a lot of that falls on the jungler, but a lot of it falls on the support as well. But I want to look around the map because also like I expect more out of Someday as well. Like Someday is another guy that didn't really do much of anything either. And he's a longtime veteran, one of our better top laners for quite some time. So like that's another guy that I think is a little bit disappointing. Even if I didn't think he had a terrible split, still definitely a drawback. So I think there's disappointment to go around pretty much every role. So I think I'm with you. I'm gonna go with the two actually. Also,
Yeah, I forgot to make this point when we were talking about 100 Thieves during the TL section, but one thing that I did want to bring up, sort of as it relates to Doublelift and then the struggles of the rest of the team, is I felt like the whole series against Team Liquid was exactly what I was talking about last week when it came to 100 Thieves sort of failing around Doublelift. And part of the reason why I thought he was actually worthy and deserving of being the third All Pro 80 carry was because more often than not, Doublelift was in good spots and playing well the majority of the time, but the team just constantly was crumbling around him in terms of poor decision making, making big mistakes, closer being AFK and whatnot. So I just thought that that whole series against Team Liquid, Doublelift was ahead in pretty much every single game state, but constant mistakes from 100 Thieves was kind of shutting down Doublelift's window of opportunity.
yeah, they actually had a couple of their own narratives. We mentioned like should we take the Jensen Worlds narrative seriously, and we had that discussion. But 100 Thieves had a couple of their own, which is like playoffs closer. He had a terrible split. Like, did we really buy that was gonna like? Honestly, I was a little bit bought in, but like I was like, I'll need to wait before I see that. And then after they just flopped in playoffs like they did the rest of the split, I was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't even have given that any whatever. And then the other narrative was like, Doublelift always wins in summer. This team wasn't winning the fucking split, man. Like, no way.
I shed a tear when 100 Thieves like locked in Viego in that fourth game. I was like, oh my god, they just went back to like old 100 Thieves. Like that was also the like right when that happened, I knew 100 Thieves was going to lose that series in that game because I
I mean,
thought
I don't hate it. Closer was pretty useless on everything else, so why not put him on something where he's not useless? I don't mind that at all.
but that champ is just useless. So
It doesn't. Well, I mean, contracts made it look pretty good today.
we've discussed this. Win more champion. You get kills
Mm.
early, you win. You don't get kills, you do absolutely nothing.
Yes, Viego is a win more champion. I agree. Okay, so we both gave him a two. Farewell, 07 to both of them. TSM for good, kind of. We
Yeah.
think. And 100 Thieves until next time. Uh, okay, we got to do some playoff previews now. Maybe we should try to speed run these
Yeah,
to.
I'm gonna pull up the bracket real quick,
Okay.
to give the people the idea of. Wait, this is an old image,
Oh
bro.
no.
Oh, I can't even be asked right now. Well, anyway, that was supposed to be the updated one. That's the old one. We don't have the
He
playoff
grief.
bracket.
I can give you a time. I can send you a quick one,
I
but it
no no
takes too
no
long.
can't be asked.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's just talk about what series we want to talk about first. Which one are we talking about first,
Uh,
JNT?
First series. This is Thursday next week. EG versus Team Liquid. This I feel like is actually going to be a really good series, both in terms of the skill level of the two teams being relatively close, and also the various dynamics we have going on. Where talking about 100 Thieves, sorry, talking about Team Liquid, very topside Summit focused, and EG very mid lane Jojo focused.
Yeah, this is where I'm going to relate back to what I was saying. Like, they pulled off the split push against 100 Thieves. Do you think they're going to be able to do that against EG? I don't think so. Um, I thought Piosik had a pretty good split, so I guess I'm looking to him to shut down JoJo because I think we're still in the shutdown JoJo, and you got a chance boat. Maybe Revenge and Unforgiven or whoever proves us wrong by having another pop off game, but I'm not ready to believe yet. So if there's some guy that I think could shut down EG, it's going to need to be Piosik. But his playoff hasn't. It's been pretty hit or miss as well. I guess in short, I just don't have a lot of faith in Team Liquid. So I'm going to go 3-1 Evil Geniuses. Should I go 3-0? I'll go 3-0 actually. Yeah, 3-0.
I'm going 3-2 Team Liquid, and while I
Okay.
did just talk about the dynamics of mid lane and top lane, I feel like the place that this series is going to be won is going to be the bot lane, because I think we get a 4JJ Yawn. I guess what I would like to see from Team Liquid is, while their identity is mostly Summit playing some form of a carry in the side lane, I would actually like to see them go more back towards what we were seeing early on in the summer split, which is a really bot lane focused Team Liquid, and sort of putting Summit on, yes, something that is strong in the side lane, but can also function very well in isolation. like a Gnar. I think everyone's just like shit talking Gnar that like, oh man, this champ awful. Like, why, dude? The guy is just like smurfing on Gnar. Like, I don't care if they pick Gnar. Like, pick it. He plays well on it.
Yeah,
But
I don't mind that either.
I want to see some bot lane focus out of Team Liquid. I think that Unforgiven and Ayla also fit into the category of bot lane similar to your FBI and your Stixxay, where these guys just want to play slow and farm it out in the early game, and they're going to do the majority of their heavy lifting in the mid and late game. And I think that's basically the complete opposite from Team Liquid's perspective, where they get the majority of their work done in the first 15 minutes of the game, and I want to see Team Liquid doing that.
I am going to close with my closing statement. 2 words. Mid gap.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be a problem.
I'm hoping that APA can weather the storm on some comfort. But at the same time, wouldn't surprise me at all to see EG just go at him repeatedly in both champion select and during the game.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of
Not
banking on the
even just
fact
in
that
lane.
APA is not going to get rolled.
Not even just in lane. I think his decision making out of lane has been pretty poor. I think he's going to get uh stomped. I hope he doesn't. Like I clearly I'm a doubter in his ability to be an LCS player right now, but that doesn't mean I don't want him to perform. I just God, that's quite a tall task you got here. Yeah. Anyways, 3-0 EG for me. You got TL 3-2. What's the next series?
Speaking of the 3-0, I definitely have Golden Guardians 3 over Dignitas. Despite the L today against NRG, I don't know. I thought they were the better team, and I still don't have a ton of faith in Dignitas, specifically from the bot lane. And Golden Guardians, I think, is just going to roll them.
Yeah, I think they will too. I think there's a mismatch in every lane, maybe not top. Don't get me wrong, Licorice has been playing great. I do think there's a chance that Rich can show up and actually give Licorice a fight. And admittedly, this might be a little bit of flawed logic because I'm going to kind of repeat what I said about the Golden Guardians NRG series. Dignitas had a lot of success through their mid jungle, and I still think that Golden Guardians has the best mid jungle in the league. Maybe not anymore after MNS played pretty well, but that's a whole nother discussion. I'm still giving Golden Guardians the very heavy sided mid jungle advantage. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm going to give Golden Guardians a 3-0. Not to mention, I do think their bot lane is just way better than Diggs as well. So that's insurance, I guess.
If Dig has the advantage anywhere, it will be the top lane, and even at that, it's still relatively minor either way.
I will be so sad if Golden Guardians loses this series. Like NRG winning, I still feel great. Like I'm so happy to see those guys go to Worlds. And while I would love Jensen to go to Worlds again, he's been many times. He'll be fine. This Golden Guardians team not going to Worlds will be devastating for me. This cannot happen.
Honestly, I'm bought into the Dig making worlds, both for the Jensen meme and also because I think Rich would be deserving to go. That guy
Okay.
played well. Also played really well in the TSM series. Didn't really talk about him a lot, but yeah.
Okay. What's
Give me some
next?
Rich.
What's
Oh,
our next series?
back up into the upper bracket, we have Cloud9 versus NRG in the upper bracket. I guess it's not the upper bracket finals, but
What's the point of trying to
yeah.
predict this, man?
I'm going to go 3-1 Cloud9. That's my prediction. And there's not a whole lot of logic behind it because I think there's a world where NRG just gets slap clapped 3-0 in 20-minute successive games. And I think there's also a world where this is like a slobber knocker 5-game series. We're getting 40-minute games every time.
Do you think there's ever like any like NRG doesn't feel pressure to win because they're the very obvious underdogs and like they've already
Yeah.
made worlds so they can breathe, and just have fun?
I mean, I think
Is that just like,
in the same
am I
sense, I think
like,
that also applies for Cloud9. Like they already made worlds, so
but this team is expected to fucking win. They're supposed to win the whole split, you know?
I mean, at the same time, expectations for almost every single team have been dropping like a fly for the whole entire split now. So wouldn't surprise me at all to see Cloud9 just lose it all of a sudden, considering FlyQuest lost it, Golden Guardians lost it today. Team Liquid's been losing it. 100 Thieves been losing it.
That
NRG
would be
is
wild to see
NRG is like the
NRG.
only team that's going against the grain and like improving as the split's been going on. I guess Cloud9's also kind of been improving as the split's going on, at least in terms of end of the regular season and this first playoff series we saw.
It would be wild to see NRG go right to finals, like cement themselves in because the winner of this goes to finals, right? That's how it works.
Yep.
Yeah. Uh, Cloud9 3-0.
I gave NRG the one game just because I feel like you're going to get some classic Cloud9 inting going on.
I'm cheering for NRG for sure. I definitely am cheering for NRG.
As he
Uh,
says, wearing the Cloud9 jersey. Jesus.
I wear a different jersey every week.
Where's your
I
NRG
would get an
jersey?
I would get one if it wasn't garbage. Their jersey sucks. That's the same reason why I don't have a Golden Guardians jersey. I
How
want
come
one.
you never got
Their
a
jerseys are
CLG jersey?
boring. No, their jerseys were shit for a long time.
So, by the sound of
Dude,
it,
remember the
you're
ones
not
that
going to be getting
CLG
an
had?
NRG jersey anytime soon then.
If they get a good jersey, I'll get one. Same thing with Golden Guardians. I'm just waiting for them to get a decent jersey. That's why I got another FlyQuest one. The spring FlyQuest jersey was sweet. Yeah, Cloud9 3-0.
If we want to live in our little hypothetical worlds, the Sunday match will be between the winners of the losers bracket matches, which we just previewed. So, in my scenario, it'd be Golden Guardians versus Team Liquid, and in your scenario, it'd be Golden Guardians versus EG. I think I'm still rolling with Golden Guardians regardless, and I'm assuming the same for you as well.
The final week, which we will be attending, we will be watching Cloud9, NRG, and Golden Guardians that weekend.
I feel pretty safe to lock that in as well.
I'll be so sad if Golden Guardians isn't there.
I mean,
Mind you,
in all
we'll enjoy.
honesty, if not
Go
for
ahead.
if not for NRG winning today, I probably would have had Team Liquid in the top 3. But I just
I
think
don't.
that
You
Golden
have Team Liquid
Guardians.
in top 3?
I mean, yeah. Well, not
Wow.
anymore now because Golden Guardians is in the lower bracket. But before that, I would have had them in.
Maybe you're just too stung because TL 2-0'd them. Maybe you're too like you can't let go.
Well, I mean, so did NRG, but it doesn't stop me from thinking that Cloud9 will wipe the floor with them, minus one game of inting.
Yeah. Anyways, I hope Golden Guardians is there. But I will say though, if the finals is NRG C9, that will be a fun finals. I that will be sweet.
Unless we get some true shenanigans with Dignitas making it out of the lower bracket, I think we're going to have a pretty hype 2 matches of finals regardless with bloody, exciting teams.
I think I just don't want it to be Team Liquid.
Man, you're a TL hater. What's going on?
I want the NA players. APA is the only one, and I don't think he's that good. So I guess Jan,
I mean,
sort of.
Cloud9 only has one NA player.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely count Sven as an NA player. He's
Golden
been
Guardians
in.
only has 2 NA players.
Yeah, but Team Liquid has.
They have one.
They have 2, I guess. You can count Jan.
Oh, yeah, I guess. Yeah, true. No,
Yeah.
he's definitely NA because I'm pretty sure
I
his
I just
flag
I
is
yeah,
US.
I don't know. I want I definitely still look at Cloud9 as being like NA players with like Fudge obviously, Blabber obviously, Sven. Like to me those guys are NA. Now, I don't mind if people still have Sven as like a European player, but I just need to remind you that Sven's been playing in the LCS for like 5 or 6 years now or something like that.
What is he? 8, 9,
9,
10,
11,
11,
12.
12, 6?
Yeah.
6 3/4 now, or 5 3/4, I mean.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, last up, we got some quick news and then a little bit of a world's update because teams are now qualifying for the World Championship just these past 2 days. Cloud9 and NRG for sure going to Worlds. They've already secured at the very least number 3 seed because them being in the winners bracket finals will ensure that they are at the finals weekend. And as in North America, the top 3 will automatically qualify to the World Championship. There's this whole notion that like, oh, 4 teams for NA. It's like, dude, no, there's not 4 teams. There's 3 teams with a potential of a +1 should they beat the respective European counterpart in the 4th seed as well, the World's qualification match. And yet I'll remind everybody that North American has only won 1 tiebreaker ever in its history versus Europe. So in terms of the track record we have going into this, I'm still looking at it as 3 NA seeds and 4 EU seeds, for now at least.
Europe's 4th seed did not move on. Was it? Wait, was it? You got to refresh my memory here. It was Mad
That's
Lions both times,
okay. Here's
but
the
Mad
thing.
Lions
I
was 4th seed
understand. I
last.
understand that people want to make fun of EU 4 seeds for not making it out. Well, guess what? NA's never even had a 4 seed. Like
No,
we're that
let
even
me.
bad.
I'm
We don't
trying to
even get
clarify
one.
something with you. I'm trying to clarify something. Both times it was Mad Lions that didn't move on. Were they the 4th seed both times, or were they the 3rd seed the first time that Mad Lions didn't make it out and into groups or whatever?
No, I believe they were the fourth seed in that case.
Dude, I always can't fucking remember when it
They
comes to
they were the
LEC,
fourth
man.
seed because that was 2020, and 2020 was G2 Fnatic, Rogue, and Mad Lions, wasn't it?
I don't know. Maybe someone can help us in the comment
No,
section again.
it was G2 Fnatic, Rogue, and Mad Lions. I remember because Rogue
Okay.
Rogue was in the group with Damwon and those other fools, and then Mad didn't make it out of plans, and then Fnatic was in the group with. I just remember they played Top East Swords in the quarterfinals, and G2 was there because it was G2 lineup.
I haven't watched enough LEC this split to have a strong opinion on their 4th seed. But I have watched enough LCS to not have a lot of confidence in our 4th seed. That
Yeah.
like I could see us lose. But I don't think it's impossible. Like, who do you think we're sending as the 4th seed right now? Who's the 4th best team in North America?
Guess it's Team Liquid, but it would have been
Like,
NRG
to me,
before
it's not.
today.
To me, it's EG. I think it's clearly you give the edge to TL over EG. I give the edge to EG over TL. So
Yeah.
we think it's one of those.
Well, I don't know. People again, call me an NRG hater if you want to. I don't think that NRG is that good, despite them qualifying for Worlds and being in winners bracket finals. I
Are they
two
for
two
sure locked
weeks
top 3 though now?
they
They
are,
are,
yeah,
right? Because yeah,
they
yeah,
are
because
for
they're going to
sure
Worlds.
locked, but
Yeah.
that doesn't take away from the fact that I don't think that they'll be that good.
What if it's Dig?
Wild, but I'd love it. I'll be the loudest Dig fan in the crowd in finals weekend if they're there.
How things have changed.
What do you mean? I was invested in Dignitas from the beginning because of how poorly
No,
they
you
were
were
playing.
not. You thought they were the worst team in the
Yeah, but I
league. We
was
talked about
invested in
this.
them because they were so bad.
Okay.
I'm still investing.
That's still things definitely changing though. Like that is still.
Oh, I mean, come on, Jensen. I
I
like
wanted
Jensen
you to be. I wanted
and
you to be
Rich
a.
is
I
smurfing.
like Jensen too. I do like Jensen.
People, dude,
Insane.
people got to put some respect back on Rich's name, man. The guy somehow didn't make All Pro, and then people don't even talk about him, and then he just absolutely dicks on Haunter in Game 3 of that series, like wins them the game.
Yeah.
Oh, me, I
I'm
love
gonna
me
be
some
so
Rich.
sad if Golden Guardians loses that. I know I've said it like 8 times, but like God, this is
Well,
like
we kind
they
of
can't fuck this up
Yeah.
anymore.
We kind of got into the LEC a little bit, but they have yet to start their season finals or whatever. So all the teams that are in the season finals are still eligible for that. The only ones that have been eliminated are, Vitality, Koi, Astralis, and those other fucks. Team
Okay.
Heretics.
And what else we got? What other updates?
Well, LPL, they're basically done. For whatever reason, the LPL, despite having the most teams, the longest season, the most games, the biggest playoffs, they're actually the season which finished the quickest out of all the
Hmm.
major regions. JDG, they won the finals. They're going as the first seed. BLG, number 2, based off championship points. LNG, just this past night, won the gauntlet match against EDG, and then the last seed will go to the either EDG, Top Esports, or Weibo for the.
Apparently the JDG like the finals, apparently they were awesome, the best of 5. I woke up in time just to watch game 5 and I thought it was boring. Apparently the rest of the series was a banger.
Yeah, I haven't checked out any of the LPL finals, but I have been watching some a good chunk of the LPL playoffs beforehand. But there's been LCS to watch.
I haven't caught up on all the LCK. I'm probably going to do that tomorrow. I
Well,
haven't caught up on
speaking of
all
the
that.
LCK,
Should
their
I take my
playoffs.
headphones off? Are you going to spoil for me?
Well, I was just gonna say that their playoffs are about to start, and the 6 teams that are in playoffs are KT, Genji, Life, Damwon, T1, and
Okay.
DRX. So
That's fine. That I was expecting.
yeah, no
I
no no
just
spoilers.
I don't want the D plus or KT games spoiled. I watch all of those.
They're in playoffs, so they can still qualify for Worlds.
I knew
But
they were in playoffs. They were
same as
hogging the
the
whole split.
same as the LPL, 4 teams qualify for that. No Worlds qualification match bullshit like in NAEU. Those teams
Okay.
they deserve the full 4 teams.
Okay. That's it for the Worlds update, right? For
Yeah, a bit of quick news. Jan won Rookie of the Year, and Golden Guardians won Coaching Staff of the Split.
I have no problem with either one. We said that like I remember saying like if MNS is available, then I would give it to him. But what I thought was funny was he replied to the tweet that the LCS put out with a question mark, maybe thinking he was eligible, or maybe he was just memeing. I'm not sure. But they said on the thing he was not eligible. So I don't know why he put question mark, but it was funny regardless. He might just be memeing. He seems like a bit of a memer. Also, Cloud9 just kind of creates meme players. Like as soon as you go on Cloud9, you're automatically a memer. So maybe that's what was happening there.
Yeah.
But anyways, Jan, yeah, that was my pick. If it wasn't M&S, it was Jan.
And then most improved player will get announced before the beginning of the next round of playoffs, which will be Thursday. And that's what did I already say? It'll be most improved player. So
Yeah.
if I had to make my pick for that, I'd probably pick Revenged at this point. He feels like the clear cut person to pick. Not to
There's a lot of people that you could go with, but I think this is going to trigger you, J&T. So trigger warning.
okay.
Um, Licorice and Jojo Pyun. They were trash because it's across the year, is my understanding. They were garbage in spring. Now, mind you, Licorice started to turn on towards the end of spring, but still, over the course of the year, he was one of the worst players in the league. Same with Jojo. He was inting every freaking game. And now Jojo's an MVP candidate and Licorice is first all pro. So like the reason why this I think is triggering J&T for our listeners is that like these are guys that have been in the league, right? Like this is not I guess JoJo's is only his second year, so like that's maybe okay. But it's like he started high and had to go down to come back up to improve. So that's what's a little bit weird. And the same thing goes for Licorice. Does that trigger you at all, Jinter?
I mean, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me that a player can be given an award for most improved when at one point or another they were already labeled as the best player in their role.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the case of Licorice, it's a little bit different than JoJo because JoJo is only not even 9 months removed from people calling him the best mid laner in the LCS.
Yeah.
And while it's definitely true that he struggled massively in the spring split and performed poorly and had a massively improved summer, I I, I cannot at all get behind the notion that because he improved because he was so bad in spring and played so well in summer, it's like, yeah, sure, but he was also one of the best players in the league not even 9 months ago. And
Yeah.
this the same argument applies for me with Licorice. It's a little bit different because we have not seen Licorice perform at the level that he has been since around season 9, season 10. But still, at one point in his career, he was labeled as the best top laner in the league, even one of the best players and most valuable players in the league to a certain extent during the course of season 9, early parts of season 10. And yeah, sure, he had a pretty big fall from grace when it came to his times on FlyQuest in the early parts of Golden Guardians. Yeah, he's playing much, much better now, but I just really cannot get behind the notion that a player can be considered top in his role, have one bad split or one bad lengthy struggle period, and then once they get back to their former self, they're just all improving. And it's like, no, you just got back to where you were supposed to be.
Yeah, I totally understand your reservations for not wanting to vote that way. I'm not that we actually get an official vote, but I get like what you're saying. For me, I think if we are just asking like who actually improved the most from spring split to summer, I do think it's JoJo. He was awful, like really, really awful, and now he's an MVP candidate, maybe even the front runner. I don't know. Um, so I would say that I feel better about giving it to Licorice though because it's been a couple of years since. You know what I mean? Like it's more understandable. But anyways, what I think is interesting about this award is that I don't think there's normally this many like potential options because even the revenge one is a good one to point out, right?
Even Insanity could be
Chime,
considered one. Last time we
Chime,
saw Insanity in
Insanity.
the LCS, he was pretty bad, and now he was one of the top 3, 4 mid laners to split.
There's probably a lot of guys that we could pick from, actually.
I
Um,
mean, you could even pick from Jan. Like that guy had a pretty poor spring and made shit
yep,
ton of mistakes and cut out a lot of them in summer.
yep,
But if I had to
yep.
pick one, it'd probably be Revenge. I know we're still I don't know, shouldn't say we're revenge haters, but we're revenge skeptics, maybe we'll
I
call it.
like the I like to I think it's kind of a funny meme though on this podcast that like we always have to
We have to keep
like
revenge in check, you know?
yeah, we have, but then we also have to promise our listeners that we're not revenge haters. I think
Yeah.
we on the weekly. It's like every week starts off with like, guys, I promise you we want revenge to do well, but yeah. Okay, what else for
Well, the
quick
last
news?
thing, but the most important thing, obviously, is that Faker is back playing in LCK, whipped out the Zerath in their game against KDF. It was in the third game, maybe it was the second game. Can't remember. Faker's back. Let's go. D1's going to Worlds.
I think it's silly, but I mean, I'm not there, right? Whenever there's a guy that's got wrist issues, I think you should always be super omega extra cautious. Maybe in their eyes, they were super omega extra cautious and gave him way more time than they think they needed to. So maybe they are being cautious. I'm worried about risking the GOAT's career by getting him back in there again. I'm a little bit worried.
Well, I mean,
But
the way that I see it is they were already locked for playoffs anyways. So the fact that he was playing in the last and second to last regular season matches, I think, should be a good thing that
yeah,
Faker was playing because he didn't need to be in there.
weren't they losing to like everyone though? Weren't they on like a massive loss streak, or they lost a bunch of matches or some shit
Well,
like
yeah,
that?
when Faker wasn't playing, but then,
Yeah. So like that could be kind of like you're panicked and like, oh shit, we got to get things together before we go into playoffs, and
but
maybe
they,
that's why he went.
I don't know.
It's
I
speculation,
guess
I'll admit. Oh,
logically that doesn't make sense to me, but I understand the point. But
yeah, it's just speculation. I'm not pretending like I know what's best for Faker. It's just I'm worried. That's it. I'm worried.
I mean, Faker not being at Worlds would be a sad
I
time.
don't I don't want him to have to take 3 years off like Uzi did, or was it 3 years? How many years did Uzi take off? A
Okay,
lot.
well, it definitely wasn't 3 years. I'll tell you that. He was on
It wasn't three
EDG.
years.
He's on EDG this year. He was on BLG last year.
I thought before that he was off for like 3 years or something.
No way, it was 3 years.
Maybe I am exaggerating. I just thought it was more. It felt like a long time. Maybe it's just because he
It
wasn't at
was
Worlds for a
one
little
and a
bit.
half years, if you want to call it that.
Hmm.
It
That's still a long
was
time to not have
it was
Faker though.
summer. It was summer 2020 through to summer of 2021. So beginning of summer 2020 to end of summer 2021, he wasn't playing.
That would still be a long time to not have Faker. That'd be like 3 splits.
Yeah, but that's why he's Faker. That's why Uzi's shit. Because he's not
Yeah,
Faker.
I just want him to continue to be Faker. That's all. That's all I'm
Exactly.
saying. Okay, that's it for this episode. God, playoffs have been pretty fucking sweet, I must say.
Yep.
I am enjoying them.
Me too.
Uh hope you guys are enjoying them also. Remember, if you didn't subscribe or hit the like button, just another reminder to do that. Leave a comment. We might have said some bonehead things. Shout out to the people that are keeping us in check. Last week we had some misinformation around LEC, which I mean, God, I can't. We probably had a bunch of misinformation around LCS this week. When there's so many games, I need you guys to understand. It's really hard to remember all the shit that happens. It's really difficult.
Well, especially if
So
we're talking about other regions, like the people who are more knowledgeable about those regions, feel free to correct us in the comments. Like
yeah.
we don't get all that info, so
Also, we're not really all that sensitive about being wrong. If we got something wrong, just let us know.
unless you're talking about
Um,
Faker, I'll shut you down right here and now. You talk
okay.
shit about my
Anyways,
boy.
continue to do that. We appreciate you guys correcting us. If you guys have the info, that's pretty awesome. Next week should be the same thing. We're just gonna go live after the Sunday series.
Yep.
Okay. That's all the updates for now. Yeah, we'll go live and we'll tweet. And remember, we have a Discord. You can join that as well. That's it for this episode. We'll see you guys next week. This has been episode 136 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.